Hello, teachers of emergent bilinguals. Welcome to my blog, Linguistics for Teachers at able.com. My name is Ingrid Heydrich, and today we are going to talk about subjects and predicates. Subjects and predicates are the two elements that form a sentence, and we're going to talk about why they form the basis of reading comprehension. So, what exactly is a sentence? Every sentence is a grammatical message that consists of a relationship between two elements, a subject and a predicate. All right, why do we need grammatical messages? Why can't we just speak in words in any order? Well, because we might be able to understand each other somewhat, but after a while, communication would break down. So when we are learning a new language, we really do need to understand how the pieces of a sentence go together so that we can start speaking in grammatical messages, not only to communicate better with people, but also for reading comprehension, to understand the who did what of a sentence. Let's look at an example. In this example, the student is my subject. It answers the question, who? The student is what we call a noun phrase. Even though student is a noun, it's part of a phrase because it includes the article the. Is smart is my predicate. It answers the question, is what? And it's part of a verb phrase. So here, the verb is a linking word. It's linking the student with smart. In many languages around the world, and even in some varieties of English, is, or which comes from the verb to be, is not necessarily required. However, in standard varieties of English, it is. And so we really want our students to understand that is and the different forms of the verb to be, I am, you are, or were, was in the past tense. We really want them to understand that that is a verb, that is linking a who or what with a what. In this case, is smart. Let's look at another example. Here we have the student again. The student studies English. The student does what? Okay, so here we have another verb phrase, but in this case, studies is an action word. Now, most people think of verbs as action words, but I really want your students to become more aware of both action and linking words. If you go to my blog post, you will see a list of more linking words explaining how they function in sentences. So now I'd like to model for you how I'm going to present this to my students. This passage comes from a book called Esperanza Rising by Pat Munoz Ryan. It's usually done in the 5th grade. And I am going to do a close read with my students about the meaning of this passage. Now, my students who are emergent bilinguals are going to need extra help, extra scaffolding for basic literal comprehension of this passage. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to take apart some sentences together with them by subject and predicate. Now, we simply don't have time to do every single sentence, and every single sentence is probably not necessary. So I'm going to choose 2 sentences that I believe are essential to the meaning of the passage. And that first sentence is this one. Everyone who lived and worked on El Rancho de las Rosas was gathered at the edge of the field. My students have gotten some background info on Esperanza. They understand that she comes from a wealthy landowning family in Mexico during the 1930s. They lose their money and Esperanza goes on her life's journey. It is an amazing story that many students will be able to connect to. And I want to take this sentence here apart for them because it's a little bit of a complicated sentence. First, I'm going to ask my students, who was gathered at the edge of the field? Who? And we'll talk about the meaning of gather, that it means come together. And so I want to ask them, I want to focus their attention on the subject. Who was gathered at the edge of the field? Everyone, okay? And this might be difficult for emergent bilinguals to understand that everyone is a pronoun, meaning people, right? And so we really want them to recognize this as a pronoun. But it's not just this one word in the subject, and that's what's so tricky about texts. It's actually this relative clause as well. Who lived and worked on El Rancho de las Rosas. Who is a relative pronoun that is modifying the word everyone. And it's a little extra bit of information after everyone, right? And we want our students to understand that this whole phrase here is the subject, is the who of this sentence. Everyone who lived and worked. Okay, so now we know the who of the sentence. Now let's focus on our verb. What was everyone doing? Everyone was gathered. I really want my students to understand that was is a verb linking everyone with gathered. Gathered here in this case is the past participle. This ed here indicates that it is a completed action, right? They are gathered. They are already standing. Now we can go a bit further. Where? At the edge of the field. And now, after this colon, we can go more in depth with our students into who exactly is everyone. Esperanza's family, the house servants, etc. Okay, so now my students are getting a picture of the setting of this passage, right? Because I helped them break down that first complicated sentence about everyone standing or gathered at the edge of the field. Now, I want to focus their attention on this. These are some additional phrases at the end of this list of the people, starting with Esperanza's family. It is not a complete sentence. However, it is important to the understanding of this passage. And so I want to focus my students' attention on who was holding their own knives. Notice how, even though this here is not a complete sentence because it doesn't have a verb, I made it orally into a complete sentence so that my students could better understand it. Who was holding their own knives? And now we can focus their attention on the 50 or 60 campesinos. Okay, and what were they holding in their hands? The straw hats. Okay, and now that we understand that we're talking about the campesinos, that they're holding their straw hats, we can say, what else were they holding? They were holding their own knives ready. Okay, in this case, students need to recognize the verb holding, right? Holding what? Which is the object, holding their own knives and holding the straw hats. Okay, so now that we helped our students break apart those two critical sentences, let's take it a step further and have them analyze why everyone is gathered and why the campesinos are holding knives, right? And the reason is because Esperanza's family owns this land. They are going to harvest the grapes, and the campesinos are the laborers. They are the ones who are going to cut the grapes from the vine. So here you can really see that when we take the time to break apart some important sentences in a passage for literal comprehension using who, what, is what, or does what, students get a much more nuanced understanding of the literal meaning of the text so that they can then go on to do some analysis. Visit me on able.com and read the rest of my blog post for more information. Thanks and see you soon.